Hi, this is Lisa Dropkin from Edge Research. Welcome to American Millennials, Cultivating the Next Generation of Ocean Conservationists webinar. In this webinar, we present follow-up communications research conducted in fall of 2016 and sponsored by the Packard Foundation. With me are my fellow researchers and colleagues.
Stacia Tipton.
And Aaron Berniking.
A little bit about the purpose of this project. Our project was tactical in nature. What can we learn about the impact of the communications that the ocean conservation community are putting out there, and where can they be made more effective? Our goal was simple: test a spectrum of communications materials with our millennial audience segments identified in our previous research. We wanted to find out what cuts through, what gets attention, which topics and formats will rise to the top, what elements of our communications are effective, and which ones aren't working so well. And of all of our communications, what's going to generate engagement? And if they do, how do millennials want to engage?
We focused on segments that we identified in the research as the best targets for engagement. The global greens, defined by their high engagement on progressive issues, they were primed but not sold on the ocean as a cause. Coastal concerned, defined by their proximity to the coast and high levels of engagement with the outdoors and being tuned into a variety of ocean problems. Waiting in the wings, younger, mostly 19 to 23, and lower information, but had a high empathy for the ocean. Here's a snapshot of the discussion boards and a few comments from the respondents. The segments ran true to form in that waiting in the wings was lower information, the ocean was not top of mind, but there was a lot of empathy and concern as they learned more. The coastal concerned admittedly took the ocean in their backyard for granted, and the global greens who are primed to be more concerned and want to raise the alarm bells. From the waiting in the wings, we heard that the ocean is like a person you don't see every day, but if you hear something happen to her, you would be heartbroken. It's that type of relationship that no matter how far apart you are, distance cannot tear it apart. The ocean is that person you rely on. From the coastal concerned group, for me, the ocean is like the neighbor that you always seem to let slip your mind until you're back home and you couldn't imagine growing up without them there. I've always been close to the water, and as a result, I think I take it for granted. And for the global greens, I think people need to become more aware of the danger that is being brought upon the ocean and marine life. I think people get so caught up in regular, everyday things. Our methodology brought together 3 small groups, one for each segment, and they participated in a Facebook-style digital discussion board for 1 week. Each group was exposed to the same materials in a randomized order and had a tool to mark them up, rate them, and then talk about their reactions with one another. We also talked to a few respondents over the phone after the board closed to get more information.
In the communities, we prompted millennials with a range of materials and topics. In terms of topics, we had examples that were everything from general ocean PR and cute animals to headier topics like drilling in the Arctic and climate science. Thank you to all the Packard grantees who submitted examples of communications. We had formats that ranged from video to op-eds to petition appeals. In addition to what you shared with us, Edge went out into the public sphere and found a few examples to bring into research from industry, from advertising, from places like BuzzFeed.
With this study, we had 3 key questions we were seeking insights on. First, do communications convey the message intended? Well, our communications were not terribly confusing, and they didn't generate a whole lot of skepticism, but they also were not generally very inspiring to our audience. In a previous communications audit conducted by Goodwin-Simon, they found that the focus on problems without much of a cause or solution seemed to be the rule of the day, and our previous research showed that this type of approach can be emotionally draining for this audience. A second key question is what cuts through, and we had some good insights there. We saw high production value cutting through. We saw animals, especially the unusual ones, as well as unknown tidbits of information being very interesting to this audience. As well, they're interested in scalable or innovative solutions to ocean problems. And our third question was whether our communications would generate engagement. And what we found there is, this is a generation that's used to exchanging digitally, and they're definitely willing to do it for ocean issues. But the material either has to be unusual or eye-opening, enhancing their own brand with their social network, and the image has to be easy to understand or the issue self-explanatory. They're not experts, and this stuff can be hard to explain. We're going to take you through a few trends and insights, and then we're going to go into some very specific examples, taking apart what worked and what didn't work in each of them. In terms of issues and content, a few trends and insights to bear in mind. Something that's new, an issue I've never thought about, something I've never heard about, but is a new tidbit that I can tell others about, was very intriguing to this audience. New and unusual animals also move the needle, not just cute ones either. There was some evidence that animals are more likely to get shares, but less is more. They don't need an exhaustive laundry list of everything that's going extinct in the ocean. They just need one really good one. We also learned that old news doesn't excite, even if the issue is important. A case in point, and we'll go into this in a little more detail later on, is a piece about Arctic oil drilling. But all of the examples that were used in it were of the BP Deepwater Horizon spill, and we lost a lot of our audience along the way with that. We found that this group likes to see information coming at them from different places, multiple paths to engage fully. And some folks in our research looked beyond what we gave them in order to decide how they felt about the issues. Scalability, scalability. Is the action we're asking them to take directly connected to the problem, and is it plausible that enough people doing it will make a difference? This matters a lot. And unfortunately for fisheries, they were a tough sell. We did learn that millennials seem to be more interested in the people than the policy. We saw that illegal shark fishing could be very moving, but the concern was more about the critters and a little less about the policies and technicalities of it. Focusing on waste and bycatch might be more engaging, but a lot of the inside strategies that were presented in communications were just focusing on policy. Finally, with plastics, again, we saw that this issue is very engaging to the millennial generation, but the question in their minds is, where do we go from here? Some trends and insights on format and tactics. We did see that production value matters, especially if you're going to a video format. This is an edutainment segment that grew up on Discovery Channel and IMAX. Video had a lot of hits and misses with this particular test. If we're using this medium, it needs to be good. But we also found that you could strip down and do much simpler video approaches if you weren't looking to evoke a lot of emotion, and instead what you wanted to do was explain a complicated issue. In that capacity, we saw Chalk Talks very effective. We also saw with video that the use of celebrities should be done very thoughtfully, as Tim Gunn would say. They can be a major distraction. When it comes to social and activations, they worked a lot better when the ask was very specific and directed at the individual behavior. Too often, there was a lot of letdown around these pieces. Who's responsible for this? Society. What do I do? Recycle. Things I do already. On social, don't forget to introduce yourself. They are landing on social sites with no idea of who you are. And while they may find your content engaging, because they don't know you, they won't stick with you.
And top and bottom performers from the public sphere. Fish Food 6-pack rings was one of the hits across communities. It generated 4 out of 4 stars overall in our 4-star system. It was a bundle package that included a Huffington Post story, a link to the brewery's website, and a video. There were a few things that made this resonate with our millennial participants. First, it was a great example of the type of innovation they're interested in, something they recognized as a scalable solution that was innovative and would help the ocean. Second, it offered an opportunity for personal action. You could be a friend to the ocean by doing something as simple as buying this type of beer. Lastly, we thought it was interesting that the voice here is that of business entrepreneurs, and our millennials found it to be authentic, incredible, and persuasive. In the next example, we brought a piece from the HBO show Vice. In the ocean conservation community, we don't always think of ourselves as competing with media like HBO, but this is the type of thing that sets the expectation for production value and user experience among our millennial audience. This HBO Vice video about overfishing generated 4 out of 4 stars in the community. Partly it works because the topic is a fit to Vice's brand and media voice. It makes a real emotional connection with millennial participants. They told us they were sad, disappointed, angry. They were moved after this piece of communication. It was a little sensational in tone, which they can get away with, but that's also partly what made it motivating. This also got really high ratings for sharing and passing on. It was the kind of example that millennials wanted to pass to others. The last top performer that we'll mention today is a piece of writing. It was the only piece of reading and writing that made it into the top 10 of materials tested. This was an op-ed titled "Leave Arctic Oil Under the Seafloor" that was featured in the Huffington Post. In testing in the communities, it got 3 out of 4 stars overall. One of the things that worked here was the defiant voice of the piece. Millennials were energized by the spirit of the writing, even though they didn't recognize the authors Carl Safina or Sylvia Earle. This is where we learn that important lesson that Lisa mentioned about looking forward versus looking back. Those who stuck with the article and got to the end and some of the timelier pieces were more motivated than those who focused on the beginning of the article, reflection on the BP oil spill, which they felt was old news. We're going to wrap up with some of the bottom performers from the public sphere. This was a video. We might not have predicted this result from the video "Nature is Speaking." It was an ocean video, part of a series from Conservation International. It scored only 2 of 4 stars overall. It had a high number of votes from millennials as the least engaging of the day. We would say that nature may be speaking, but it shouldn't talk in Harrison Ford's voice. A repeated critique was that the voice of the narrator was distracting if they recognized him, or too downbeat for the topic if they wanted something more positive and energizing. Millennials also overall told us they wanted something with a faster pace. The movie trailers that they did find engaging moved at a more rapid clip. They had more dramatic highs and lows, and they had follow-up action as a possibility. Another piece that we can learn from is an op-ed about Magnuson Stevens from the website talkingfish.org. This generated 1 out of 4 stars overall. It was interesting to the EDGE team that our millennial participants were getting the policy issue. They were comprehending the topic. They understood what was at stake when they read the information. They just didn't want to do all that reading. Based on examples of policy communication that tested well in other parts of the research, we think there are better formats to break down complex and technical information, like the chalk talk, like the whiteboard style video, maybe even animation. A recurring theme was that this blog post also had a lot of industry level jargon. It wasn't a conversation starter. It wasn't a conversation that millennials wanted to be part of or pass on. And finally, generating 1 out of 4 stars, we have an example from the Shell Energy's corporate website, specifically the Innovations microsite. There were a lot of colorful pictures and catchy headlines here, but millennials told us the web pages had too much flash and not enough substance. As much as they want high production value, there wasn't enough depth of information for them. It was also an interesting contrast to their reaction to fish food 6-pack rings, where they were very skeptical of the Shell Energy voice, and they had been more motivated by the small business entrepreneurs.
So to sum up, some takeaways and communications guidance coming out of this project: put the problem before the policy, hold someone or something accountable for the problems that you're talking about, and choose solutions that scale or show a scalable path forward. In order for millennials to promote the cause or the issue, it has to be self-explanatory. They are not experts. And don't forget, most don't know you or your brand, so it's their brand they're putting out there when they share with others. For more information, you can contact any member of the EDGE team at the information you see on this screen. Thank you so much for listening.